戦だ。
そうそうよ。孫家三代の名代として再会の挨拶に参ったぞ。
郊外殿が道を示してくれた。孫悟の将兵たちを奮い立て。今こそ曹操を打ち破る時だ。
前までは逃げ回ってたがよ、今度は違うぜ。待ってろ曹操、おめえの首俺たちが取る。
Hey guys and gals, Eastern Fox here. Hope everyone's doing awesome. Now, before we begin, I'd just like to apologize for the delays. Life has hit me pretty hard with commitments as of late, but I hope to get back on track with the many things I've been wanting to do on YouTube and elsewhere. So, this time, fittingly enough, I'm trying to revisit Dynasty Warriors 9 in the wake of its less than stellar entry. And in doing so, I hope to at least, mostly for my own sake, come to terms with how the game is on release, or was on release, and now that the dust is kind of settled, so to speak, just to talk a little bit about my impressions about the game in comparison to other entries, and just how it is in a vacuum, because in general that's how I like to discuss games, how they stand on their own terms, and if they're sequels, only sparingly compare it to other games in the same series. Also, to clarify, I'm going off script here. This is just a total candid, very casual discussion about the game, because I feel like that's the best way for me to cleanse my palate of it once and for all. Because I realized that in playing Dynasty Warriors 9, I've gone back and vehemently played the previous games, particularly like Dynasty Warriors 5 or 8, which are two of my favorites. And in doing so, I've realized just how much the series has changed, and how much Dynasty Warriors 9 just deviated from the established formula in an effort to give the series like a reboot, not a fresh take, which ultimately, you know, regardless of what people say, I do at least respect Koei and Omega Force for trying something different, even though in comparison to other hack and slash games that are open world, and other game series that have taken to the open world structure, it's nothing new. I do still at least appreciate them trying different things, you know, because the series, if we're being completely honest here, was stagnating quite frequently with each release. So now let's actually begin with Dynasty Warriors 9 itself. Now, my thoughts on it personally, overall, I think the game is actually decent. It's not a total wash, but it's not exactly spectacular either. In a vacuum, and I must stress, in a vacuum, on its own, just as a singular piece of video game entertainment, it's not the worst thing to grace humanity, alright? I know a lot of people like throwing around these hyperbolic statements like Dynasty Warriors 9 ruined my life, or Dynasty Warriors 9 is the worst thing to ever happen to the series in years. It's a sin upon hack and slashes and all that nonsense. It's like, guys, come on. Just take a step back, breathe for a moment, and just really think of what you're saying. Like you're comparing this game, fittingly enough, to other entries in the series, but so when you call it the worst, one of the worst games ever, you're comparing it to the likes of, you know, E.T. on the Atari, or other such games that are such blights upon the creative medium that simply talking about them just gets people angry. But again, you're free to have your opinion, and I respect that, honestly and truly. But for me, I don't think the game is a complete waste of time, nor is it the best. I just think it's decent. It's average. It's mediocre. It's at best, it has moments of potential where I think the open world structure could have really elevated the Dynasty Warriors formula, and at worst, it's totally immersion breaking, and I have to just stop playing right on the spot. So now let me just talk about why I think it's actually decent. So one of the things that stood out to me almost immediately when I started playing it on release day was the music. Now bear in mind, I really am a sucker for the mishmash of Oriental and traditional Chinese instruments and rock and roll. I'm just really a fan of that kind of musical style, and it's something that's suited Dynasty Warriors for many years. But I just really think that this time around they tried to make it less pop-centric and more focused on orchestral themes, like some things that are very grandiose in nature. And one of the things I realized while I was traipsing the overworld, geez, I say overworld like it's a Zelda game, but what I mean is traipsing around the landscape, just encountering random battles, taking bases, and doing missions and all that. I really did appreciate how the music weaved between very soft ambient tracks to the fast-paced rock and roll and heavy metal sounds that we're all used to as fans. Like, that kind of dynamic switching is something I really appreciate. So when talking about elements that I feel are salvageable about the experience, I inevitably have to speak about the combat. So I've seen plenty of people throw around perfectly valid arguments, mind you, that the combat is too simplistic. It's too focused on rote button mashing and doesn't have a lot of depth to it. You follow the same patterns with every single encounter, and no matter what you do, it'll always end the same way with the quick strike or whatever you call it. I honestly forget what the move is called. Now to those arguments, I would say, yeah, they're pretty much right, but only to a degree. Because in my perspective, yes, the combat is simplistic, but for me personally, I do still believe that that it has that same cathartic quality to it, much like previous games, where it's still I just don't care what people say in that regard. It's still fun to just send dozens of guys, like dozens of peons, flying all over the place with like mighty swings of your weapon. I don't know, like, just to me, I still think it's fun no matter who I'm playing as. And Dynasty Warriors 9 still has that quality. Sure, not to the same extent as the previous games, but it's still there. Now, and I just think it's selling the game short just a little bit to say the combat is awful. It's not the least bit engaging. Yeah, yes, it's mind-numbing, it's repetitive, but then again, many aspects of the previous games were like that as well. On its own, however, again, looking at it in a vacuum perspective, on its own, it's not Ninja Gaiden or Devil May Cry. I would never ever compare it to the granddaddies of hack and slash beat 'em ups. Not in any realm of possibility. It's just one of those things where I feel like, and if from a game design point of view, it's effective. It does what it needs to do. It allows you to slash your way through whatever opponent you come across, and gives you a sense of empowerment because you're effortlessly performing all these intricate combo strings with only single button presses. Like, to me, I hate the fact that you can't do manual charge attacks anymore. It's literally just you have a zone attack or whatever it's called to map to the triangle button or Y button if you play on Xbox, and your attack string is just one button press, and it changes depending on where the enemy is and the state they're in, which on paper is a really cool concept, but they just didn't flesh it out as much as they could. Like, that's essentially my consensus on it. Wasted potential. Now, is it a mark against the game? I'd say yes, but also no. Because again, it has potential. It has its cathartic moments, but it really doesn't add anything to the experience. It doesn't feel as invigorating as like the weapon switching combat of 7 or 8, which I think is probably the most dynamic the series combat has ever been, no matter who you ask. And lastly, I think the final element it has going for it, interestingly enough, is in a way. Actually, no, it's kind of both. It's the open world structure and the visuals. Now, what I mean by that is the open world style of the game combined with the seamless transition between various landscapes and biomes, or whatever you want to call them, does make you feel like you're in another world. And ultimately, in my eyes, if a game, and no matter the genre, if a game can make you feel as though you've stepped into another realm and are experiencing something entirely extraordinary, something like far beyond the world you know, and you feel as though you're there, I think the game is immersive. It's done its job in that department. Now, for Dynasty Warriors 9, it both succeeds and fails. Again, I try to look at both sides here. Now, where it succeeds is making you feel like you're in China. I know that's a broad thing to say, but it's true, because you walk around, like, you know, the various cities and towns, and you see the monuments and the climbing mountains in the distance. Like Omega Force, they really did go far in terms of landscape detail. They did their research, it seems. They wanted to make it feel as authentic to the actual landscape of China, mainland China, as they could. And it does feel varied enough to where traveling around it's not like exciting, 100% exciting at every piece of moment-to-moment gameplay, but it is nice. Again, for me, there were little moments where I was just riding around on my horse, and you know, I have auto run turned on so I could just look at all the hills and rivers in the distance, and like the various cities. I mean, it, like, in some small way, it was effective at creating the illusion of being in China, and I do commend them for that. I think it is nice to see, and I can see them trying. Now again, I'm putting aside the negative stuff for now. I'm just talking about getting the positive first. So the world design, the open world structure does work, but where it fails is, and now, okay, I have to kind of stop myself because I have my old school Dynasty Warriors gears clicking right now, but for me, it was immersion breaking, because I'm used to when a battle is over, the officers return to their camps, and, like, you know, there's a time skip and we move on to the next one. It was really weird to capture a settlement, or to finish a battle, to siege a castle, and just have the officers just casually start running to the next point of engagement. And what was also really strange is that no one, aside from Lu Bu, even rode a horse. Like, who else noticed that? I'm serious. Like, I'm posing that rhetorically. Who else noticed that no other officer besides Lu Bu and Jiu, the player character, ever rode a horse? Everyone just kind of ran around on foot. I just thought that was really weird, and I think that's a side effect of the pathfinding, like the NPC pathfinding, or whatever you want to call it. So it succeeds based on aesthetics, but it fails in the actual, like, mechanics of the immersion, because there's nothing stranger than just watching a battle unfold, and then as soon as you kill the commander, the allied officers, they just kind of like immediately start moving down a set path towards the next city. It was just really strange. Well, now we approach my favorite part of the discussion. Something that I was both excited and chomping at the bits to talk about, and dreading every single moment of it. The voice acting. I'm sure many of you, in fact, I'm sure all of you, for that matter, Dynasty Warriors fans or casual newcomers to the series, can agree. The English voiceover, it's not good. Guys, it's just not good. It's really bad. it's lackluster. The actors don't even sound like they're enjoying themselves, or either they're even trying for even the slightest moment to sound like their characters. It really does feel like an afterthought production, like a nothing effort. It's as though they were given barely any direction on the characters or the context that they were performing in, and it really does create this sense that no one really cares about the drama or the story or the characterization. Now, and it's really strange because overall, in terms of the writing's actually not bad. Like in many scenes, it's actually decent, and at worst, it's the typical cheesy Dynasty Warriors fare. But it creates this clash of sensibilities, where on the one hand you have decent writing that's trying to flesh out the scene and story and make the characters feel like they're engaged, and you have this voice acting that just sounds like bad ADR, like they're really just reading off of a script without any attempt to emote or to even sound like they give a damn about what they're saying. I mean, the long and short of it is, it's horrible. I really can't say it any better, or try to articulate it beyond just saying I despise it, and I think it's an insult to the previous actors that worked on the series that were actually professionals. Now, before I get ahead of myself, and before anyone assumes that I'm bashing these voice actors, like the current voice actors, I mean the ones that worked on 9, for their work, I mean no disrespect to them personally. I'm sure they're all perfectly fine people, and that they do enjoy their craft. I'm not saying that like they're complete hacks, but in essence, when you look at the games, or rather when you look at the game as a whole, and you see how every character is performed, the performances speak for themselves. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. They sound like they don't give a damn. I mean, pardon my language, but the actors sound like they legitimately don't care about what they're doing, and they're just trying to chase their check. Now, I could be totally wrong and just be unaware of what exactly happened in the studio. Maybe there was like misdirection, or they had to rush through the performances. I have no idea. I don't work at Koei or Omega Force, or was privy to the voice auditions and recordings. I'm just speculating. But in my eyes, again, their performances speak for themselves, and to me, it's absolutely horrendous. It's the worst in the series. And when people say, well, the voice acting's always been bad, the voice acting's never been good. Well, like, you're trying to ask for Shakespearean, performances, blockbuster Hollywood Western style performances in a game about Oriental mythical heroes charging through battlefields and killing thousands of dudes single-handedly. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know if you're looking for realism, or if you're just used to playing games like The Last of Us and having every character emote like they're these grim father figures, and they're humorless and all that stuff. I'm getting a little off track. My point is, yes, I'm not saying the voice acting's always been 100% good, but for the aesthetic, tone, and genre of the game, it worked just fine. It was fitting. It was meant to be cheesy, because I don't think anyone can argue that the games don't take themselves seriously. And when they do, it even in Japanese, even in the original Japanese dub, it sounds weird, because Koei has their own perspective on the games. The Japanese absorb the game differently than we do, or any other players. So we all have our taste. That's just how things are. But in my perspective, I hate it. I absolutely despise the voices. I just think it's so insulting to all the work that the previous voice actors put into it, since the early games, to make their characters feel real as they could, and to make them charming. I think the voice acting in any game is just as important as any other aspect of design, but here it just falls so flat on its face it leaves a crater. I just can't say it any other way. Moving on from that, thank God. I'm just so glad I got that off my chest, because it's really something that bothers me a lot. For negatives, I would say the technical design of the game like in terms of glitches and texture work and all that stuff, that's also a very, very low point. It's a weakness of the experience, and for me, it takes me out of it pretty much every time. Now, granted, they have patched the game quite a bit. I mean, they must be on like patch like 2 point something or whatever, but overall, they really can't salvage too much of the graphical experience because that's set in stone from the development cycle. And they just really dropped the ball on the optimization front. Like, no matter what platform you play on, you're gonna run into frame rate drops, the blurry textures, object pop in, like officers and troops on the overworld. They have like this LOD animation where they look like they're moonwalking, and then when you get close, they disappear and then reappear quickly with their actual models. It's strange. The game is full of stuff like that, and no amount of patching is really gonna get rid of it unless they just decided to like rebuild the game from the ground up, which I highly doubt they're gonna do. So yeah, technical performance is it's almost laughable the more I think about it, and the animations are very janky, clunky, and much like other people have pointed out, that it looks very robotic. It looks and feels more robotic as well. The more you examine things, characters feel so lifeless whenever they're talking to each other in dramatic scenes. And what few pre-rendered scenes there are, it takes me out of it because the lip syncing isn't matching the vocal movements. It's like they did that in Dynasty Warriors 7 and 8, and yet they couldn't do it here. It's like I don't understand that they can never maintain a consistent level of quality with any Dynasty Warriors game or spin-off they work on. It's like, oh, is it gonna have English voices? I don't know. Are the lips gonna be matching the words? I don't know. Like, it's like, oh, now we have English text, but we don't have English voices. Oh, wait a second, we don't have English text, but now we have English voices. Like, it's weird. I don't know what the hell goes on during the development process, and at this point, I'm just kind of like throwing out my frustrations. Although, to be perfectly honest, it feels good because when the game first came out, I was just so depressed, to be perfectly honest, depressed at the state of it, and I tried so hard to like it, tried so hard to get immersed in it, but after a while I just had to accept that it wasn't the Dynasty Warriors game I was waiting for. And that's fine, because I think after a while everyone has to learn to criticize the series they love dearly and to see them as imperfect things, but in doing so find enjoyment out of them. I just think that's a very healthy thing for any fan to do, no matter what game you're interested in. And Dynasty Warriors, of all series, has room for growth. It has room to change, and I think it will. But, of course, no matter what happens, we still have Warriors Orochi 4 to look forward to. I mean, that's what I'm keeping my chin up for. Don't know about you guys, but I'm looking forward to smashing through hordes of serpents as my dream team. You know, I'm sure others would be as well. Anyway, guys, I think that's about enough out of me, but I truly hope that this gives a clear view of my thoughts on the game. Now, in conclusion, if I were to, like, you know, give some final words on Dynasty Warriors 9 as an experience, I would say I'm disappointed, but at the same time I'm relieved to see that Omega Force is willing to try other things and to evolve the formula. Of course they're going to stumble, like any other developer or long-running game series is bound to. I mean, Lord knows we can make a laundry list of game series that tried new things, tried to switch up their formula, and people hated it. So this is just one of those moments. I'm not discouraged. I'm disappointed, but I'm not, like, preaching the end times for the series. It's not going to stop. It's not going to slow down, because they're clearly still making these, and I think they're going to keep making it for as long as they feel like it. So this is just it's just a moment of change for Dynasty Warriors, and that's all it represents to me. An evolution, or at least an attempt at evolution of the Warriors formula. But as we've all learned from these games, You may lose battles. You may think you've lost the war, but all it takes is planning and patience and the right amount of fortitude to overcome any challenge. And I just think we need to be patient with it. Let's see what the future brings. But alright guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you look forward to what's coming next, because trust me, there's gonna be a lot, and I think you'll enjoy what's coming. But for now guys, stay safe, stay awesome, and fight on.